You can never have too many clamps, they said. But once you have all these, where do you keep them all? This video is brought to you by Skillshare, an online learning community. When I did the shop tour video a while back, there was some interest in my clamp storage over in this corner and some good ideas on how to improve the clamp storage. Some things like hinged racks so you could swing one set of clamps out of the way to get to the ones on the bottom. The way this is right now, there are 3 rows and some of the top clamps are hanging over the lower rows so that when you want to get a clamp out, you got to kind of fish around in there. And sometimes you knock them off, and occasionally I've actually had one hit me on the forehead, and that's no fun. So this is not the best system in the world. I'll show you a close-up and you can kind of see how it was done. But today I actually want to change this. As I make improvements in the shop and bring some big machine tools in, I need to rearrange things, and I think I have other stuff that needs to move into this corner so that I can make room for the bigger tools, and that means the clamps have to go somewhere else. And I think that somewhere else is going to be this space down here in this brick chimney chase. This is something that really serves the upper floors of the house and is just a hole here. Probably be a good place for firewood storage, but it usually ends up with just a place to pile stuff that I don't have anywhere else to put. So I think a rolling clamp rack that can park in here and then kind of bring it out when I need the clamps will free up that space over there and make better use of this space. Well, it'd be nice if it would hold all the clamps. I have some that are longer than this. I've got some 8-foot pipe clamps and some 6-foot long bar clamps that I use for big projects. Don't use them very often, but they have to go somewhere else. They don't fit on that rack anyways. So I don't really have any hopes of getting those into this space. This is just a set of racks that the bottom one is close to the wall, then the next one cantilevers out a little bit, next one cantilevers out a little bit more than that, and they have slots for the clamps to fit into. And it's a pretty secure system. Not real efficient of space because there's room between each slot and the clamps are side by side. You could fit a lot more clamps turning them the other way and stacking them one right up against the other. And that's what I'll do in the new rolling storage rack as much as I possibly can. This will be kind of a design it as you go project because I'm just not sure exactly how all the clamps will fit in there and how I can kind of shoehorn one in next to the other to make sure I can get the most use out of that space that I can. The project will have to start with a trip to town to buy a couple of sheets of plywood to make this out of. I already have some casters on hand. Then instead of trying to bring full sheets of plywood down the basement stairs, I'll break this down with a track saw out in the driveway, then bring the individual pieces down into the basement so I can get started working on this. Using a track saw to break down plywood in the driveway is much more convenient than wrestling it through a table saw, and it actually provides a cleaner cut than the original factory cut is. So this is really a handy way to do this. I've had this Festool track saw probably for 15 years, and it has been a wonderful tool. I'm going to put some glue between these two panels. I'm not worried about a perfect lamination. I don't have enough glue to do that, but I want enough that they will stay together. I'm making this double thick just so I have more to put screws into, and I'm not limited to a 3/4 inch screw. I can get a 1.5 inch screw or lag bolt in here to hold the weight of the clamps. I want to cut a dado in the side pieces to index this, and that way it'll stay right where I want it. Probably not necessary for strength, but I hope it'll give me a better assembly. With the SawStop saw, I do have to change out the brake cartridge just to fit the dado. The brake cartridge is different for an 8-inch dado stack. And there's a little bit of a learning curve getting this cartridge out and getting my big hands into the saw. But it only takes a minute to do. Always pays to make test cuts when setting up a dado. It's almost never exact, and plywood is almost never the exact size. After 3 test cuts and some shims, I'm still just a little bit undersized. So I'm going to shim this again and hopefully it'll fit after the next test cut. It fits, but it's really tight, so I'm going to add another shim before I make the final cut. It's a big panel to wrestle through, and I want to make sure I keep it tight up against the fence the whole way. I'm using some push blocks that have rubber grippy surface on them, and that really makes it easier to keep control of the panel. I didn't keep the edges lined up as well as I should have when I glued these together, so I'm going to trim just a little bit off to make sure everything is perfectly flush. The long edges are easiest done with a table saw, but I don't have a way to cross-cut a big panel like this, so I'm going to go back to the Festool track saw to make this cross-cut. It's just a little tiny bit here. I'll pre-drill some holes for some screws and countersink them from the face side so that everything comes out just where I want it. A little bit of help from Janet to wrestle everything in place and hold it while I get clamps on. There is glue in the dado. Even after making that just a hair oversized and my test block slid very easily, it's a tight fit. And we're going to have a little bit of trouble here. Both the side and the center panel have little bows in them and they just don't want to line up and suck together. This plywood turns out not to be the best for driving a screw in. The screw heads are sucking clear through the outer veneer and into the core. And if I push my luck, I'm afraid I'm going to drive a screw all the way through and it's not going to hold anything. So that's just the way it's going to be, I guess.
I think so. There's just some places.
Well, this didn't go together too badly, although the center section did give us a little bit of trouble pulling up tight. I think putting this high spot in the middle and then clamping it down to the bench pulled that in tight enough. But just to be on the safe side, I'm not going to take those clamps off for a few hours. That provides a great opportunity to thank today's video sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes to choose from. I've been a Skillshare member for quite a few years now, well before they ever reached out and started sponsoring videos here at Black Bear Forge, and I greatly appreciate their sponsorship. It really helps make this video content possible. When I first started using Skillshare, I was primarily interested in classes on how to make better videos, things like video lighting, camera settings, audio, and in particular video editing. That's something I'll probably never learn enough of. But Skillshare has all sorts of classes for people with creative interests. Right now I'm looking at woodworking classes. In particular, I'm looking at a short wood carving class with Clint Rose on how to carve a wood spirit figure using nothing but a straight chisel and a mallet. Looks like a real interesting class, simple fun project without a big investment in tools. But regardless of whatever your creative interests are, Skillshare is sure to have some classes that will inspire your creativity. Right now, the first 500 people who use my link will get access to one of Skillshare's best offers. It's 30 days free and 40% off your first year of Skillshare membership. Personally, I think I'm going to go get back to that wood carving class while the glue dries on this, and then we'll get back to assembling the major part of this and hopefully get some clamps hung up on it before too much longer. This way. Now with the first side having set for several hours, we're going to go ahead and do the other side. I have high hopes this one goes a little bit easier, but it's going to argue with us anyways. Now on this one I found some screws with a flanged head, so it's got a big flat surface like a washer, and I was able to finally drive those down tight. I don't like the look of those screws better than the countersunk flatheads, but they're doing a better job.
Probably that's better than it was. Far better than it was.
Easier to drill the holes for the wheels before I put the bottom in place. I don't see any reason for a sharp corner on the top of this, so I'm going to go ahead and just knock the corner off. This is a lot like what you do in the blacksmith shop. It starts off with a square corner. Now I'm going to knock the corner off to kind of an octagon shape. And then finally we'll go to a round. So square, octagon, round, just like you would in blacksmithing. I did some test fitting with the clamps before I started assembling this to make sure I kind of had an idea of where I wanted to go with it. This morning I'm seeing if I can refine that. I know they'll fit the other way, but I think I like this layout a little bit better. It's going to make more sense and be a little bit better organized. Picked up some of these clamp holders from woodpeckers. They call it their clamp bracket system. And I'm not sure if I really like metal in the wood shop or not, but boy, these are easy to put in and they are good and solid. So I'm pretty impressed with them so far. I'll make sure to put a link down in the video description. With the metal brackets all installed, I need to find some way to hang all the other clamps in here. My original plan was just to build something from wood, and I had some 1/4 by 2.5 oak strips. And I thought if I laminated these together and make some 1/2-inch thick strips out of this, those would be pretty good for making clamp racks. With the addition of some other scrap pieces that I had around, this idea looks like it's going to be pretty good. Unfortunately, once I got everything glued together, I put screws in it to reinforce it, the oak started to split right away. And even after drilling pilot holes for the screws, this stuff still wanted to split, and it just isn't going to be any good for this project. Now, some of the racks are still intact and feel pretty solid, but I'm just a little bit leery about putting them in there and putting a 6 or more clamps on here, adding weight to it, and taking a risk that these arms are going to split. So I either need to step up to heavier material, 3/4 inch, maybe 3/4 plywood, or go to the blacksmith shop and forge or fabricate something that is more like those other metal racks that are in there. What do you think? Would you go with wood since it's a wood shop project? Or would you go with iron because it'll be a little bit stronger and take up less space in there, which perhaps might allow a few more clamps to fit in the long run? I am going to go ahead and put the wheels on this so I can stand it up and get a better idea of exactly how everything's going to fit in here. Looks like it fits just right where I want it. I go ahead and put some of the clamps in, see how they're going to fit, see how everything's going to relate. Then I'm going to have to figure out a layout for all of these other clamps that are going to need to go on the other side. It's starting to look like it might be a little bit crowded, but hopefully we can get this all to fit. One thing's for sure, this is turning into a much bigger project than I saw in my head. I thought it was just going to be a quick little weekend project, but it's going to take a lot longer than that. So there will be at least one more video when I figure out how I'm going to hang these other clamps, maybe some other details and talking about what went right, what went wrong, things I would do different, all that. Might be a third video. I've also been toying with the idea of putting some of the clamps on this outside surface, the ones that I use the most, some of the smaller ones that don't need so much space to hang, and maybe even hanging a little box for my glue, a paper towel rack, that would push this out a little bit further so there'd be a little bit more sticking into the room. So I can't decide if I'm going to do that. What would you do? Would you leave this as a clean surface? I do think it needs a grab handle. That's something that we can either make out of wood or make in the blacksmith shop. So we'll just see where we go with that as well. In the meantime, I hope you have time in your day to get into your shop, make something, stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next video.